Welcome to the podcast. As always, I am absolutely thrilled that you are here. You can find the Billy D's podcast pretty much anywhere podcasts are found, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, with friends over at Good Pods. I mean, the list just goes on. And we are live this morning. We are live. This is Saturday, November 12th. So if you're just scrolling or whatever and you found us, welcome to the program. And of course, the regular listeners, as always, you are so appreciated. Thank you so much for checking in. This is actually what we call one of our little bonus episodes. We're going to talk this morning about some of the things that are going on at Twitter, and also unrelated, but similarly in terms of what I am going to apply in terms of marketing, what happened with the election and the midterms. And if you've never checked out the podcast before, I am not a partisan. So when I talk about what Republicans are doing or what Democrats are doing, you know, I don't care about either one of them, quite frankly. The founding fathers, as they say, warned against a party system. And some of the pitfalls of the party system are starting to rear their heads. And it's a sad time in that regard. There's always been partisanship in American politics. I am not a young bird, as it were, anymore. And I can tell you that as an adult, this is the worst that it's ever been. It's one thing to have, let's say, you know, you're a conservative, you're a liberal, and you have a guiding philosophy. That's one aspect of this. The other aspect of this is it's getting to the point now where every subject has to go through a ideological filter. It has to go through this little process. And the outcome of that evaluation is predetermined by where your political stance is. And that is bad enough. But now we are getting to the point now where people have their own reality. And we're getting into bubbles now that, quite frankly, are very scary. Now, I'll save that commentary for another time. But I wanted to make it clear that I am not a partisan. My approach to our topic today is just going to be from a marketing perspective, from a branding perspective. That's kind of my background. So when I analyze things, I have a tendency to go toward how was this idea presented? How is this in terms of the business place, the business marketplace? How is this being put together? All right. A couple of things I just want to tell you about real quick. Like I said, this is kind of a bonus episode for us, and these are worthwhile topics, and I do want to talk about them. But they're very fluid. So I'm not going to get into a lot of details in terms of what's happening with Twitter and the election right now. This is more of a big picture type thing. And, you know, if I start going through a lot of details a couple hours from now, the situation could be different. This is more of a big picture type episode. And I like I said, this is a great topic for what we call a bonus episode. I got to tell you, in the coming week or two, we have some exciting things going on. We are going to be doing some things on location, and one of the first things we have scheduled is to do a podcast at a vinyl record store. Now, how cool is that? If you're like me, you really enjoy audio, and the perspective of, from an audio standpoint, what is the attraction to vinyl now? It's experiencing a resurgence, and we're going to talk about a young entrepreneur who is really, I got to tell you, opening a brick and mortar store these days, I give people a lot of credit. That's a scary thing, and you really have to have a good business plan, and you really have to have some courage to do that. It's one thing to, start an online buy and resale type thing. It's another thing when you invest in a brick and mortar place. You have stock, you have time involved, you have employees. That's the real deal. So anyway, with that being said, a lot of really cool things coming up with our main frequency of episodes, and I'm pretty excited. And of course, we're going to have some authors as well. One of my good friend humor authors, she is going to be on the program as well. So a lot of fun things happening. And here again, you can find the Billy D's podcast wherever you find podcasts, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Okay, Twitter. There's a lot of doom and gloom being predicted about Twitter right now. Twitter had, I don't know if I can come up with an exact percentage, but let's just say a lot of layoffs. A lot of people were let go at the Twitter organization. And of course, this is all in the wake of Elon Musk taking over the company. And quite frankly, something had to happen with the workforce anyway, because Twitter wasn't necessarily doing well to start with. So there's a good chance that a lot of people were going to get let go anyway. It does make sense in a broad sense that when you have a platform where the users generate 90%, 95% of the content, you don't necessarily need thousands of people to be involved in the process of facilitating the platform. With that being said, it's a lot more than what people realize. It's not just an app that just sits there. There's, you have enormous amount of technology to handle all of the traffic, millions upon millions of users. There's, security issues. There's the security of the app itself. And then, there's the other things that you need. You need a good marketing plan. You need that department to go well. You need sales in terms of advertising. And you have to keep it for the advertisers to come and stay. The platform has to be stable. It has to have a certain user base. It has to have a certain tone that people like to be on the platform and stay there. And that takes a lot of work. So you do need a workforce. But do you need thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people to manage other different things going on there? Probably not. So there's the aspect of the layoffs that has caused some nervousness in terms of how viable is the platform. The other thing is that they've really accelerated the rollout of some major features, which really kind of impacted some of the features that were in place, let's say in one way, and now there's a new way to implement them. And one of the key things was Twitter Blue. Twitter Blue was there was a Twitter Blue. Let me back up a little bit. That was a couple bucks a month. And I did subscribe to it, where you got the ability to edit your tweets. You got the ability to post longer videos. I believe the limit is like 10 minutes, something like that. But they've revamped that, and I believe now it's $8. And with Twitter Blue, you get the features that I just spoke about. My understanding, and here again, this is very fluid, but just to give you an idea, those features, as well as your tweets, will be prioritized in a certain thread, and you get the little check mark, which a lot of people were trying to get. My understanding, here again, this is very fluid. It's only available in the United States, maybe parts of Canada, and you have to use, I believe it's only iOS right now. I could be wrong about that. Here again, this is very fluid. This came with a lot of glitches. There were a lot of people, playing little games with the verification check mark, and doing some other things. And there was a presentation done several days ago with key members of the staff on Twitter, which they utilized Twitter Spaces, which is very similar to what Wisdom is doing, very similar to Clubhouse, very similar to, there's a number of others. Fireside now is another one. So it's an audio only type of forum that a lot of these apps are now presenting for people to have these discussions and so on and so forth. Elon Musk was in that space. And since then, a couple key members left that were in that space. So the fact that there's been key members leaving has caused a lot of concern for the future of the platform. Now, this being Saturday morning, my understanding is there was another space that was done, and apparently Elon did appear in that one as well. The news about that one is still coming to me, so I don't have all the details on that. But the bottom line is this. Okay. There's a lot of changes happening at Twitter. And how is this going to impact the users of Twitter? And how is this, what is this going to speak about the future? Okay, let me take the first part of this in terms of all of the, especially if you don't like Elon Musk, if you're not a fan of him and you're in the media, you're just having a field day with this. Okay, this is like the end of Twitter, and he destroyed the company, and he made a $44 billion investment, and he wasted his money. I'm going to dissect this a little bit. I don't believe that's true. I'm not necessarily a quote unquote fan, as we normally talk about fans. Fan is actually an offshoot of the word fanatic. Okay. And I'm not a fan per se of too many people. I have a certain amount of respect for a number of people, and Elon Musk is one of them. I kind of feel that I missed my calling with my career, in that I should have stayed with the sciences more than what I did. I enjoyed physics when I was in the different levels of school. And as an amateur, I'm very much intrigued by space technology and what it can do for mankind. I'm very much a believer in investment in space. I know a lot of people don't understand that, but the technology that's in the palm of your hand right now with your phone, the microprocessor, so many medical innovations, bone density, firefighting equipment, aerodynamics, weather prediction, all of these things, GPS, all of these have come from the investment in space technology. And I just find it odd that some people that are so willing to blow money in terms of what the government should be spending on are all worried about our investment in space. And it's the one thing that's paid off. It's not only done wonders for the economy, but it's the technology has changed our way of life on so many different levels. But here again, I digress. That's another subject. I kind of missed my calling. I really enjoy physics and all these other kind of things. And if you check into SpaceX, and in particular the rocket technology that's involved with that, how these rockets can land themselves, come from space, land themselves on a pad vertically. If you are missing out on some fascinating stuff if you don't search some of this stuff out and research it. I mean, it is just absolutely fascinating. It literally is rocket science. That's what it is. So often we say, well, it's not rocket science. Yeah, this is rocket science. And it's brought up some interesting things. Should the private sector be doing it? Should the government be doing it? There's no question that the private sector can do some things better because you don't have committees. Some of the criticism about NASA is that they were slow to adopt new technology like reusable rockets because too many industries in different states were, making money, making the old technology, making the rockets that you only use once. I don't know. I didn't investigate that. It's an interesting idea. I wouldn't doubt that there's some truth to that. But a lot of the naysayers that said landable rockets weren't feasible, obviously the private sector can do that because the private sector doesn't have to answer to anybody but itself. On the other hand, there's some things that the government can do well when it comes to these far-reaching projects. When you're talking about going to other worlds, there's just certain things that a nation can do that here again gives us a different set of dynamics to what you're doing. And I kind of feel that the relationship between NASA and SpaceX has kind of been unique in that the best of both worlds. can be applied to doing different things. So I kind of, when you check out that company, okay, it is an absolutely amazing company. So getting back to my respect for Elon Musk, I don't know how you cannot, research what's going on there and not have a certain respect for this. And when that company first started, there was skepticism about whether or not, private companies could do certain things. And here's where I'm going with this. Anytime a company, a major company, $1 billion company, especially but this applies to the local store in your neighborhood. Okay. New ownership takes over. Okay. What's the first thing that happens? It's just not going to be the same. All right. George had a certain way of dealing with customers and doing business, and it's just not going to be the same. Okay. Too bad George couldn't, work there forever, because we sure did love him. And that store is just never going to be the same without George. And I understand that. Okay. It's very common for any company, but in particular, a major company, Tesla. Okay. Doom and gloom predicted about that company. In the mid 1990s, Apple was in bad shape. Steve Jobs came back to Apple, and a lot of people said, it's too late. I'm not going to be able to do anything about it. It's in too bad a shape. Ford, same thing. We could go on. There's at different times in their histories, their demise was certain. And I don't know that necessarily that Twitter is going to be successful in the future, but I can tell you all these predictions of doom and gloom I've heard before. I've heard them all before about various companies, and people just don't like change. All right. And there's changes that, like I alluded to before, there were changes coming with Twitter anyway. They were inevitable. And this is paralleled by, if you've been following the news about Meta, which is also known as Facebook. Meta technically, I guess, is the parent company of Facebook. And, they went a direction with that Meta part a number of months ago, 6 months ago, something like that. And it was within the last year. And of course, that's virtual reality, augmented reality, and all of these other different facets. And even they knew that the model that has been social media since its inception has to change. Now, Facebook has had enormous losses. Meta has had enormous losses this last week. So the universe that is social media is going through a change. And this would be happening whether Twitter was sold or not. The model for social media has always been, let's provide a platform. Let's have a platform where people come on. They interact with each other. They follow topics and everything else. We will track their behavior. We will find out what their tendencies are. And we will sell to advertisers, and we will target these individuals. That has been the social media model for certainly the last 10 years. There's been variations of it, but that's basically how it works. Now, there's an old axiom that you will often hear me repeat, which basically says, if you are using a product and you are not paying to use that product, you are the product. And people forget about that part. All they know is Facebook is free. All right. So I'm going to go there. All right. Twitter is free. I'm not going to pay to use it. We have a certain entitlement mentality. And here again, this is getting back to marketing. One of the things that as a marketer, that's a real challenge these days is people feel entitled to certain things. Music, for example, they don't feel they should pay for it. Software. Everybody wants the free version of something. Yeah, nobody wants to pay for it. Everybody thinks all these things should be free. So you have this, and this is a challenge. This is a challenge because with the rush to get users to come to the platform, and by making it free, what has happened is that from a user perspective, there is no recognizable value because they're not paying for it. And a good example of this, if you do something, whatever you are, you're a carpenter, you're a wedding DJ, you're a photographer, whatever. When a family member, and let's say you're at the top of you're one of those carpenters that, and I've known some woodworkers who will put in a beautiful shelf and, entertainment center that's integrated into the form of the home. And they do work that I, first of all, couldn't afford. And I couldn't certainly afford the homes that these things go in. But some of these woodworking designs are like $20,000. Okay. And they'll have a family member ask them to do something for them. And so, okay, well, it's just a little project. I can knock this out on a Saturday afternoon. I'm going to make them feel really good. And I'm just going to give it to them. What happens? They end up working twice as hard on that project, and very little gratitude comes back because of the fact that they gave that away. It did not have value. So now, if you're a social media company right now, what's your predicament? Your predicament is that the user base is starting to erode. People are getting, tired of the concept. There's always a new one that's going to come along that people are going to run to because they're quote unquote free, and they're the new hot thing, and people want to go where the new hot thing is, especially when it's free. So what do you do? Well, obviously what Meta did was try to go into a different area with the whole augmented reality and some of these other things. Apparently right now they're having issues with that. I kind of feel that what Elon is doing is more appropriate, and that is with this Twitter Blue and some of these other things. I like the idea of being a user that is paying for the product. That to me is not an abomination. Okay, I like the idea that I have, as a consumer, I have some skin in the game, and now I have more of a say as a paying user in what features I like, what features I don't like. And I don't necessarily have to have as big of a target painted on my back when I am using the app, because it's not such a desperate thing to literally use your user base as bait for advertisers. So I like the idea of a user base that is paying to use a product. Now, what does that mean on the downside? It means you may not have as many users. That is very true. However, here again, this concept is very true. This applies to followers. I always get a charge out of these people, say, follow for follow. You follow me and I'll follow you. Is that follower somebody who's going to provide value to whatever it is that you're doing online? Probably not. Their next step is to find the next follower and just to get those numbers bigger and bigger. Once you follow them, you are forgotten. Okay. This is true of some of these user bases now with some of these social media platforms. You have a lot of people on there who are just creating a lot of static. So when you have a paying user base, you have a user base that may be smaller, but they're more invested in the success of what they are doing. They are more invested in their interaction with other users, and they are going to be less tolerant for BS that's on there, all the trolls and everything else. Having a paying user base doesn't eliminate trolls, but it does make it harder, because let's say you're a big company. Let's say worst case scenario, you're a big company and you want to buy 1 million accounts. Okay. You may have, as a big company, and you want to create some sort of turmoil on social media, you may have the money to buy those accounts, but you don't have 1 million credit cards. You don't have 1 million cell phone numbers. So the idea that somebody is just going to harvest a bunch of bots or harvest a bunch of accounts, it's less likely. Not impossible, because there's always a way to get around it, but it's less likely now that you are going to have casual users with no life and no vested interest in the success of the platform investing to stay there. And that's not to say that there can't be a free version of Twitter or a free version of anything else. I have any number of different accounts with different types of services in the broadcast industry, where there's a free version, there is a step up version, and there's a premium version or whatever. And a lot of times, you know what, for somebody who just wants to hop on Twitter and, read the latest tweets from some crazy celebrity, they don't need the paid version to do that. They can get that value from it. But from somebody who wants to take value out, like as in my case, somebody who does marketing, somebody who wants to create a community of business people and all that, then I should be asked to contribute a little bit more to the platform. And I'm going to be more serious in terms of how I treat that platform being a user. So I don't necessarily have a problem at all with the idea that users are going to pay to use the product. Okay. Free, a lot of times, anything free, as I have often said before, anything free is worth exactly what you paid for it. Okay. So with that being said, there's changes right now going on at Twitter. I am optimistic that Twitter is going to come out of this. Twitter for Elon, not for somebody like me. If I had the money to buy Twitter, which is never going to happen, but if I, as an individual, as a small individual, if I had the money, it wouldn't be worth it for me because there's nothing I could do with it other than to try to recoup my investment. And it wouldn't be practical for me to make that enormous expenditure when the most I could hope for is a certain percentage back. That's not necessarily true for someone like Elon, because what Elon now has is he has a marketing tool for Tesla. He has a marketing tool for SpaceX. He has a marketing tool for the Boring Company, which is, here again, interesting company. You got to check some of these things out. These things are pretty cool. But he has this way now to incorporate a lot of things that are happening into the marketplace directly into the marketplace if he does Twitter the way I believe he is going to. So he has a value there. He also has a value in terms of he is more of a pop icon figure now than what he was before. A lot of people know a lot more about Elon Musk before than, unless you were a nerd like me, you know a lot more about him now. And it didn't have enough impact, or at least one that you could measure on the last election. But I have a feeling if Twitter hangs in there and it goes the direction that I believe everybody wants it to go, it's going to be a force in the 2024 election. And that's something that these entrepreneurs really like. They like having a value, a stature that goes beyond celebrity. Okay. So there's a lot of value to Elon in terms of what he can do with Twitter beyond just the platform itself. So this is yet to be determined. I'm not sitting here saying that, hey, there's really good stuff going to happen at Twitter and it's going to be the greatest thing ever. I'm not saying that. We don't know. I learned a long time ago, you cannot predict the future. However, I can tell you all these predictions of doom and gloom, it's over and, it's been ruined and all these other things, those are wildly overstated. At this point, I've heard these things before. That may be the case, but it's too early to tell. Okay. It's just too early to tell. We're going to have to watch this play out a little bit. Now, getting into the midterm elections, as I stated at the top of the program, I am not an ideologue. I really don't particularly have a fondness for Republicans or Democrats. Somebody needs to tell Nancy Pelosi she does not work for the Democratic Party, and somebody needs to tell Mitch McConnell he does not work for the Republican Party. They both work for the people. Okay. And this partisanship is troublesome for, I believe, the future of our democracy. Not that it's going to go away, but how government is intended to work and how it's worked in the past. It might have a negative impact if we don't start turning the corner and be more practical how we evaluate issues that need to be handled in our society. And this election, there was a red wave predicted. And I don't know exactly. I know there's some at this point on Saturday, November 12th, as I talk to you live. There's certain races that haven't been determined yet in terms of what's going to happen. But the idea that there was going to be a red wave, like somebody was going to poke a hole in a swimming pool and this whole just wave was going to pour over. 2010, I believe it was, the first midterm of the Obama administration, there were enormous losses by the Democrats. Enormous. Same with 2018 in the midterm of President Trump. His party lost enormous losses in 2018. This time, not so much. And this is an interesting thing because everybody was saying it was going to happen. Everybody is used to it happening. It happened before. So here comes the opposing party and how they're going to, the pendulum swinging back the other way. Well, it didn't happen. Now, I here again, you can piecemeal this out. I know the partisans get charged up when you say this. They say, well, the Republicans still did this and they still did that. It wasn't enormous. And why? Why is that? I believe it's the partisanship. You have people say that they don't care who the Republican nominee is going to be, they'll vote for him. You have people say the same thing about the Democrats. No matter who the Democrat is, that's who I am voting for. What has this done? Well, you have now less variance. It used to be that, you would vote in maybe, let's say, in the primaries for quote unquote your person. But when it came down to the general election and it was Republican versus Democrat, there was always this idea, well, I'm going to vote for the best person. I'm going to vote for the person who talks about the issues in the way that I like them. But that's not the case anymore. People don't say that. I'm going to vote for my guy, my team. My team is going to get my vote. This is my opinion, but it's also been supported by a lot of the things I've read. I would believe that a lot of the election results from across the country would not have been as close if both parties ran on real issues. But they didn't. They relied on our team is better than their team. And depending on where you live, if you are in the United States and you watch some of the political local ads in your community, they were all based on, look how terrible what they did was. Do you want that? That's why you need to vote for me. It was all a version of that. And what's said about that is those ads work. It's too bad that we don't have an electorate that is more savvy than that. We should have an electorate that those ads don't work, that these candidates are going to have to lay out what they're really going to do in terms of nuts and bolts. But that doesn't happen. So we are more partisan now than we have ever been. In my opinion. I mean, this is off the charts. Like I said, it's not only partisan loyalty to your party, but it's a loyalty to a political ideology that is going to filter things out the same way no matter what. And beyond that, we now have our own version of reality. Facts that don't support our own opinion is fake news. That's where we're at. That is where we are at. We are now entitled to our own different version of reality. And this has shown up in the election results, which were primarily right down partisan lines. And, I really do feel, I don't know if there's a definitive way to prove this. Like I said, it's largely my opinion, but I do feel that if real issues were discussed, that there would have been victories on both sides of the aisle in much larger scale, depending on where you live across the country and what those issues were relevant to those areas. The other thing that really affected this election was celebrities as statesmen, and I have a problem with that. Every once in a while, people will mention, well, Reagan was an actor. Well, you know what? That's not fair. By the time Reagan was running for president, here again, I'm not necessarily pro-Reagan, just being objective here. By the time Reagan ran for president, he was a proven statesman. He had been involved in government and out of the acting industry for decades, for years and years. By the time he ran for president, he was involved in politics in a number of different levels. And of course, he was the governor of California. So by the time he ran for president, he had chops as a politician and as a statesman. That's not the case with people that are just thrown in there now. You're a reality star. You're known. And here again, Do you like this person? Are they on your team? Yes. Okay. Well, I'll vote for them. It don't matter who they are. This whole thing with Dr. Oz, Herschel Walker, and it's here again. It's not just because they're supposed conservatives. The Rock. There's been talk about Oprah. They're not statesmen. I don't know that I've ever. Have you ever gone to a doctor and said, yeah, I don't want a doctor that has a lot of experience. I want a doctor who's outside of the medical field because he's going to have a new approach. No, I understand the idea that a political insider is part of the problem. I understand that little argument. But the idea that we just need to pick somebody out of the, out of the mall and stick them in there and they're going to do great because they're not part of the political system. That's been overstated. And it's been shown in the results of what a lot of these people have done when they get in. Being popular, and here again, this is where you have to kind of rely on how savvy are the American people. The popular person isn't always the best person, but we have a celebrity culture now. There's people that, talking about, well, he's just an actor. Some of these people don't even have that. They don't even have the experience of being real show business people. They're famous. They were born famous. Their greatest achievement was being born. They had famous parents. So they were always on some talk show, and now they have a reality show. And they have this reality show where all they do is sit around and talk about their sexual proclivities and other things. And they're stars. They have millions of followers on social media. And all of a sudden now they become a voice. They become a voice in society. And potentially they have the ability to run for office and get votes based upon what? I understand the idea that maybe what the founding fathers intended with elected officials was that, you're only with the president, for example, the only two real qualifications are you have to be born in this country and you have to be at least 35 years old. I understand in essence, the idea that to examine someone's pedigree kind of comes from the fear of what we had with royalty. So the idea that a privileged person with access to special education and advanced education and different experiences in terms of business because of their parents or the family they were born into shouldn't have any more credence in terms of their qualifications. But there has to be something that here again, in terms of our collective wisdom as a society, we choose these people a little better. There's nothing about this reality star, social media influencer, and nothing I don't have any problem with that. I come from the world of media. I've been involved in radio. And let me tell you something. I come from the world of radio. I can tell you some of the dumbest people you will ever meet are radio people. Just absolutely dumb as hell. Okay. But they are fantastic communicators. You give them a phone book at 7:30 in the morning during morning drive, what we call in the radio business morning drive. You give them a phone book at 7:30 and say, hey, we don't have anything to do this morning. Come up with something. They'll pluck something out of that phone book and make it sound entertaining as hell. But I'm telling you, you don't want to trust these people with financial advice for your future. They're not that. You get them out of that environment and they're dumb as hell. I'm just being honest with you here. And as someone who, I come from a technical background, some of these people don't know anything about the equipment they're using. They don't know what kind of microphone they're using. They don't know anything. They literally cannot change a plug. They're dumb as hell. Okay. And I've met some, I can't say their names, of course, but I've met some news anchors, and they're very disappointing. They're very disappointing in person, but they come off on the screen as very commanding, like they know everything. And I'm telling you, they're not that. Another saying that I really like is, if you have the misfortune of meeting your heroes, you are destined for a disappointment. That is so true. That is absolutely so true. These people don't know anything. Some of them. I'm sure there's ones out there. And here again, we've always fallen into this trap. Well, you can't make generalizations and you can't do this and you can't do that. Yeah. Well, the whole point of making a generalization is so that you can make a basic point without having to break down a million different stats. Okay. Yes. Not every celebrity is dumb. Not everybody who works in radio is dumb. But I can tell you that having knowledge of the secrets of the universe is not a prerequisite for being a media figure. It is absolutely not. That is for sure. So I kind of believe that what happened with this last election was, the partisanship hurt both sides. It actually is to the point now where you are shooting yourself in the foot when you have loyalty to your party, no matter what. You are hurting yourself. The attraction to celebrities, and the need to, have them come in there and feel that they have, and nothing against Dr. Oz. I'm not picking on your person. I'm not picking on Herschel. I'm not picking on any of these people. But I do believe there has to be a better way to pick our statesmen. There has to be a better way, to, as collectively as a society, in our wisdom, who are we voting for? There has to be a better way to go about this. Anyway, that's kind of where I'm at. I really believe that in terms of marketing, the social media platforms have to realign, and they have to come up with a way to be profitable other than making the users targets of advertising. And as we move forward, if I was hired to be either the Republican or the Democratic marketing person, someone who, and I don't, here again, I'm not a political person by any stretch of the imagination, but I have to tell you, there has to be a stress on the real issues. There has to be this cultivation of a statesman. And that really hasn't happened too much during my adult life. Reagan was probably a rock star. Bill Clinton was a rock star. Barack Obama was a rock star. Most of the other elections, quite frankly, were the anti-vote. And what I mean by that is anybody but this person. We had that in the last election. Joe Biden really did not win the election. And I don't mean that the election, the numbers were wrong, but I mean, as a leader, he didn't win that election. What won that election was anybody but Trump. That's what won the election. And quite frankly, that aspect, when Trump got elected, it was the anti-Hillary vote. It was the same. I don't want the same old people in there, and I don't want a controversial figure in there. So anybody but Hillary. That was largely what elected Trump. And there has to be a better way to choose our leaders than the anti-vote. And if I was hired by one of the parties right now, what are we going to do the next 2 years? Let's cultivate a pro rock star, a proactive person. This is the person we want. We want this person because they are going to be a great leader. We don't want this person because they're not as bad as the other guy. That model has to change. It has to change. So anyway, that's kind of my spiel on what has happened with Twitter and what has happened with politics and our most recent midterm elections. If you would like to follow me, you can do so on Twitter at Billy D's on Twitter. And here again, I don't know how I hear all the time, I found your podcast here, I found your podcast there. I really am so happy that I'm on a lot of these platforms that I haven't heard of. And I really appreciate that. That's awesome. But just to let you know, if you've stumbled across us here live, or if you have stumbled across us on some platform that maybe you're not normally on, you can find the Billy D's podcast pretty much anywhere you wish when it comes to podcasting platforms. We're pretty much on all the major ones, Apple Podcast, Spotify. Good Pods has been amazing for us. Pandora, which normally I don't consider like a podcasting platform, but the percentage that we are getting of listens from Pandora is enormous. So, all of these platforms we are available on. So thank you very much for listening today. I really appreciate you checking out the podcast. A lot coming up within the next week or two with these location podcasts. So do check us out, and thank you for listening. And I am going to talk to you again very, very soon. Have a great day. I'm Billy Dees and host of the self-titled podcast, The Billy Dees Podcast. We are primarily an interview and a commentary-based podcast featuring authors and creators talking about their craft, advocates for community issues, and myself and an array of co-hosts discussing current events. There's no partisan ranting and raving going on here, just great content. You can find The Billy Dees Podcast on your favorite platform and on Twitter @Billy Dees. Thank you, and I hope you listen in.